Welcome back to a bevy of bloods for round 3 of the 2023 season. In this week's episode, I'm joined by Stevo as we get our teeth stuck into the big loss against the dominant Ds. So fluff up your tail feathers and settle in for a potentially biased yarn about all things to do with our beloved bloods. Okay, Swans fans, we kick off the round 3 review by welcoming back the bevy of bloods OG. Stevo, welcome back to the game.
Cheers, mate. Good to be back. First one of the year, and not the best result, but we'll go through it anyway.
Yeah, that's right. We'll kick into the therapy session in just a second. So, but with the game details, just quickly. So last Sunday, our Sydney Swans were defeated by the Melbourne Demons by 50 points with a final score of 21-8, 134 to 12-12, 84. So, Stevo, what were your first impressions after that loss?
50 points, yeah. I mean, it probably sounds a bit worse than it was on the balance of the whole game. They definitely blew us away in the last quarter and a half. But I don't want to overreact either. You know, it's early in the season. It's hard to get a read of how it's all going. They were very good. Swans were very flat. And we're probably not going to get a team kick that straight either for the rest of the year. I mean, I think at one point at their peak, they'd kicked 14 goals 3 to our 9 goals 8 or 9 or something. So that's also part of the story.
It's like they couldn't miss, right? Like even that last goal when the guy's in the pocket and then just cracks it towards goal, and I'm like, he's not going to try that hard. Surely he's not going to go in. And he just, that extra little dagger in the heart just at the end of the game just to really annoy you. I think Horse's response as well was, this is unusual. Like, they were kicking so straight. Like, what can you do? Like, when you're kicking 21 goals, it's just hard to keep up. It doesn't matter what you do around the pitch.
Yeah, that's it. And like, exactly. What do you do? I think at the end of the third quarter, I think at three-quarter time, the scoring shots were even. I've written down here, they were 14-4. We were 9-9 at the end of the third quarter. That's the same. That's 18 shots each. So, you know, they kicked 14 goals and we didn't.
That's basically the core of it, I think.
Yeah.
I think one of the points, my first impressions as well, just to kind of lighten this up, was Clayton Oliver's hair. How do we score it? Thumbs up, thumbs down? What's your scoring system, Steve?
I honestly think it's an improvement on his 2022 haircut. So I think the extra length in it has made it slightly more okay.
I think the best hair that's ever graced a football pitch is James Rose, round 22 in 2015 against GWS. Kicked 3 goals in the third quarter, and James Rose's hair looked like a Pantene ad. So nothing is ever going to compete itself. It was beautiful, stunning. Well,
what a guy!
what a bloke. One of the things I did notice, mate, I don't know if you saw, that the team as a whole, so the Demons, did a really good job of basically keeping Blakey and Warner without the ball, or when they did have the ball, they had very, very limited time to use it.
Yeah, they did. They stopped the Swans' run sort of off half-back and through the centre really effectively through most of the game. There was that period. There was no surprise, that bit where the Swans sort of did get on top, like through parts of the second quarter and the third. They got that run back. The Swans were able to really just ping out of half-back and through the centre again, and then Melbourne clamped them down again.
Yeah, and the other part is Buddy versus May. What did you think going into the game, and how do you think it kind of transpired? Who do you think kind of got away with the biscuits for that game?
I didn't think Buddy had a bad game. I read quite a bit of stuff in like media and social media and stuff afterwards. It was critical of the Swans' tall forwards, all 3 of them. I thought Franklin did pretty well. He got a couple of goals. He missed a couple of shots in that period where the Swans were coming back that if he'd got could have changed things quite a bit. And he actually gave a bit of spark and a bit of life to the forward line when they were struggling to kick goals. So I didn't think that Franklin had a terrible game. May is very good. He's one of the best key defenders in the AFL. So I think it was a pretty decent battle actually between the two of them.
Yeah, I kind of agreed. I kind of thought it was a really fun game to watch between those two in itself, the game inside of the game. I did like it when, I think May got the most of Buddy for a couple, not necessarily because they were the one-on-one battles, but more so just the general ground presence and where he was. And, for instance, just stopping that goal when Lever was chasing down Buddy Buddy had a crack at goal, would have scored it if May wasn't already there. Just negotiating that dual prong so perfectly. But also, I did enjoy when Buddy just flipped May off him at one
Yeah,
point and then took that grab at just outside 50, I think.
yeah, it was a good one.
All right, look, let's get straight into the good, the bad stats. What did you see, Steve, that you're going to kind of raise up here?
In terms of the numbers, I guess the one this isn't good. I'm going to start with bad. The Swans' pressure this week was terrible compared to the last couple of weeks. I mean, in the first two games of the season, this pressure rating that no one really understands how they make the number, but what we do know is that 200 is elite, and the lower you get from 200, the worse it is. So this week, the Swans were 168, and they've been over 200 the first two matches of the season, like pushing that 200 mark and well beyond it, even at points of games. So that stat was a bad one. And the other one, 82 points from turnovers the Swans conceded in this match as well, which was a pretty telling one. So those were my two stats. Neither of them are good stats, but they're the two that stood out for me.
Yeah, they're pretty ordinary stats. I mean, to back you up, I've got my notes here from the game, the rewatch of the game, which was tough to watch. But the first four things that I've got here is Dill, miss kick, turnover. Dill, miss kick, caused the goal. Blakey, miss kick. Mills didn't follow Oliver, caused the goal. Laddams, non-foul in ruck, caused the goal. It felt like no matter what we did to touch it, every mistake we made was punished. And a good AFL team will do that to you. So it's not so much perhaps of how, at that stage of the game anyway, it wasn't so much about how good the Ds are, because you do expect your opposition to punish you for a mistake. It's also, we were kind of letting up those mistakes in very easy places to run on. So it was a bit tough to watch. So it's a pretty good stat there. I would probably touch on the contested possessions. So it's one of those things, and it was mentioned on the Twitter space, and I'll mention that at the end of the potty, that you don't get beaten by what you know. We know two things about the Ds. Their contested possession is superb. They've got some of the best in the game at exactly that. And the way that their defenders move and their strength is don't bomb it on their heads. I feel like we did both of those things, and then we walk away with a convincing loss against playing into the opposition's strengths, and then we're baffled as to how it happened. That's my take on it. What's yours there, Steve? I would like to hear it.
Yeah, I think so, and you know what you're going to get against Melbourne. They're and Melbourne, like, okay, they've got these stars. They've got Petrarca and Oliver out of the middle, and they killed us. Like, they really cut us up. They both played very good games, but it's not those two guys. It's everyone else. It's all of these other players at Melbourne that come in. Like, their wingers were very, very good. Langdon and Hunter, they both had very, very strong games off the wing, and got a couple of goals out of them as well, out of their wingers. Our wingers did not. If you look at like Stevens and McInerney, who were on the wing for good chunks of the game, and then Stevens got subbed out in the final quarter. But I think they got a combined, I've got written down here, 28 combined touches out of the two of them, and the Melbourne wingers got almost 50 between them. So this is the difference. These sorts of other players, just, we know their stars are going to kill us because they kill everyone. But we really didn't cover for all of their role players. And Melbourne have a lot of role players, and they really did a job on us.
That's interesting, mate. What about, one thing I did put in the good category was that our clearances were 33 apiece against an outfit that's quite good at that. So I took that away as like, okay, good. We weren't smashed, at least in that place. I mean, mind you, we're also up in the clearances in the grand final, and let's not talk about how that ended up. But yeah, what was your take on all that?
Clearances is one which, like, you always look at because you want to know who's been winning the clearances, but then what's really important is what happens after the clearance. So, like, in that first quarter, I think the Swans were up by quite an amount in the first quarter in the clearances, but we lost the quarter 6-1. So it's what happens after the clearance. So if we get a clearance out and then they turn it straight back over and score, then winning the clearance doesn't really tell us the story about who's on top in the game. So I think clearances is one of those stats in footy that you can be a bit careful with. Hit outs is another one, which I think a lot of the time what's important is what the ruckman does after the hit out, unless they're getting a perfect, like, Nick Nat Max Gorn down your throat tap, which happens even for these guys, happens occasionally. That's not like they're doing it every time, because even if you're the best ruckman in the comp, you've still got a 2 meter bloke trying to knock you over while you're trying to tap it to someone else, you know. So it's not easy to get that perfect hit out. So then what's really important with the rucks is what happens next after the tap, and so that's why I'm also careful with the hit out stat.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. Look, I think I've written the stat down as a somewhat positive unit because of, I guess, our question marks over Laddams and how he would go against Grundy. So, and I'm referring directly to what he was doing in the air against Grundy. So to see Grundy, to see him, I think he was equaled up at third quarter or at least a half time there. I was like, okay, that's positive. I think it was 14-13 at half time. And I was like, well, good on you, Adams. Like he's still amongst it. He's competing against a very, very good ruckman. But yeah, I agree. What Grundy did after the ball and the link-up play and where his positioning was and how he was adding extra around the ground was particularly special. I think Laddams kind of came into his own a little bit more at the fourth quarter when, yeah, granted, it was lost and we got absolutely thrashed on the scoreboard, but he was in good position. He took a couple of great marks against opposition that were just, he outmatched, like just absolutely outmatched by a couple of inches, and won those won those marks. And I'm like, okay, good. He's in the right place at least. He's matching up well. Still not getting around in places that I would like to see him. So, like, for instance, we were in a back pocket, and I think it was Lloydie that had it looking for an option out. That's when you expect your ruckman, and it's where we would typically see someone like a Sam Reid in the right position, which would be on that wing, ready to take a contested mark against a mismatch and then get the ball propelling forward. And Laddams were kind of stuck in that back pocket as well. He's kind of standing there. And I'm like, Laddams, move. I'm screaming at the TV. But that's going to come in time. So he's not going to be perfect position all the time. And it's just another game against a very, very good outfit. He's only going to do well. But all in all, I was kind of happy about the way that he played, and we'll get into that in a little bit, I guess. But
yeah, he's against Grundy. Grundy's one of the elite ruckmen in the competition. There's only probably half a dozen elite rucks, and Melbourne have two of them. And and Laddams and he's not that experienced. Like I think we expect maybe a bit much of a guy that doesn't have a huge AFL resume behind him yet. He's developing as a ruckman still, and he wasn't disgraced by one of the handful of really top rucks in the AFL. So yeah, I think it's a bit harsh on him to be getting stuck into Laddams for having a terrible game, which I've seen a bit of online.
Yeah, like one of the fellows did the Swans win, who has a channel on, not a channel, but he's got an account on Twitter, and I recommend to everyone to follow him. He's quite interesting. It's quite good and insightful. He did mention that when we think of ruckman, we think of your Nick Nats, your Paddy Ryder's, your Grundys, your Gorns, like all these like elite ruckmen who have just insane skill sets, just crazy DNA, and we're not potentially that geared up to just watch a genuinely old school ruckman to just be available. Someone who can compete in the tap, follow it up, put a crunching tackle on, and take a decent mark every now and then. We can't expect him to be like taking speckies every week like Nick Nat. Like no one's that gifted. So it's one of those things where we're all kind of gearing ourselves up to be used to a ruckman who just does ruckman stuff, follows up the ball, smashes a mid every now and then, puts himself in the right position. That's really what we're asking for Laddams. And I guess from what I saw, I was pretty impressed. I was happy with the way he was pushing on.
Yeah. I mean, he had a few bad moments that he'd want back, like a few possessions that didn't go right or wrong positioning and stuff, but I don't think he was disgraced.
All right, good. It's good to see we agree because we're about to disagree in
we got plenty of disagreeing to come on me.
Well, all right, let's type into the favorite moments and missed chances. What was on your radar of things to point out in the game that you enjoyed or disliked?
Okay, favorite moments. There were two for me, and they happened pretty close to each other, actually. The first was Papley's left foot goal in the third quarter. I mean, Papley only got I think 8 disposals for the whole game, but 3 of those were goals, and a couple more were inside 50s where he set up scoring. So I think that was a really strong impact for a small forward. He played really, really well, and that one way he gets it, wheels around his left foot, and just launches it from about 40 meters. That was great. I love that, and it got us sort of a sniff, to get back into the game in that third quarter. And then a few minutes later, Errol Goulden got a really good quick snap in a whole bunch of traffic in front of the goal and managed to hoik it through for another one. And so those two back to back was when I was up and about. I thought, okay, we can probably pinch this off this lot. And then they just went bop, bop, bop. And that was the end of it. But at least at that moment, I was feeling good about the game.
Yeah, it was enjoyable at that moment. It was really fun.
Yeah.
Rowbottom's crummy goal I loved. And that was like forward pressure and a Marty in the middle of it as well. I think I recall the same thing happening last week with Amadi as well, where he was kind of big on the pressure on the ground of all places. Caused the ball to kind of come out of the contest, and one of the mids ended up scoring off the back of it. So to see the second week in a row and to see Rowbottom, shove off a tackle pretty convincingly too, and I was like, wow, Rowbottom's put on some kilos. So he looked really good. I love that moment. That was kind of a good moment for Amadi and Rowie in particular, just doing really good things with their own little spots there.
Yeah, I've got a missed chance actually, which sort of rolls off the back of my favourite goals a few minutes ago. That Blakey miss, where he runs through the square, he gets on the end of a long one, he has a launch from about 50. If that goes through, it's a 1-point game. He misses and it's a 6-point game, and then that was the closest we got. So I just kind of think if there was one little frozen part of the game where maybe that could have been it. If that had gone through, who knows?
We might have had a half a decent chance. Yeah, that's fair. The other one that I liked, Buddy's little dribbler goal. Buddy's playing like a traditional small tall forward in the first week, taking contested marks, and did a couple of that last year as well. And he's gone back to playing as a tall small forward. So that crummy goal, slapped on his boot. I don't know how it didn't bounce off anyone, but it didn't, and got himself a goal for it. And I was up and about at that point. I was like, oh, yes, like that's nice to see. Buddy's really kind of desperate for him. So, yeah, lovely to see. But that was a few decent points during the game that we felt that kind of got us excited, got my heart pumping in the right way anyway.
Yeah, there we go. I guess I got one more sort of, this isn't really a missed chance, but it's more like a gone missing. We had a lot of like prime ball using players that were really, really down. Like if you look at Warner got 19 touches, Parker 17, Goulden 15, Heaney 10. That's not a lot of impact out of 4 guys who you would really, really want to be having an impact. So in a sense, it's a missed chance because, if they'd been more present in the game, we could have had a different result.
Yeah, mate, I agree. It was tough to watch, and looking at the stat board, I know the stats aren't everything, but our eyes were backed up by the stats. As you mentioned there, a lot of key players not getting their hands on the ball, or at least not getting near the ball and putting enough tackles on to pull this in our direction. So it was it was a game where across the ball we were a bit flat. I don't see it any other way.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about best on ground. So onto the Bob medal, our equivalent of the Bob Skilton medal, where we give points out to the players in the game, and then we provide them with this week a ukulele lesson that I'll instruct. I'll give them a little voucher to help them out. I can play a pretty mean ukulele. We give 3 to 1 points to the best Swans players in the game, with the highest points getting that voucher for a ukulele lesson. So 3 to 1 goes to Tommy Mack for 3, Millsy for 2, and Ollie Florent for 1. All right, mate. This is going to be interesting. Tommy Mack for 3 points. What did you think?
Oh, look, I'll be honest. I didn't have him in my votes, and I'm starting to think maybe the reason he's got 3 votes is because I didn't know that the prize was a ukulele lesson, and maybe he's just not such a musical fellow and he needs a bit of instruction. So maybe that's why you've got him in there at number 3, because I can't for the life of me remember noticing him in the game. Maybe that's good. He's a fullback. Maybe it's good if you don't notice the fullback. But yeah, he wasn't bad. Like he didn't play a bad game, but I didn't have him in my top 3.
One of the reasons I think it's hard for you is that, okay, so the way that we put us together, so just to break the fourth wall for everyone out there listening in, is we have a WhatsApp channel, and then that's just kind of channel or whatever. post game, there's a bunch of us that just basically just slam it on and just start talking about the game. We ask for Bob points, and then we break it down together and build some kind of aggregate. Everyone was convinced together that Tommy Mack was like, look, Tommy Mack played a pretty good game and like won a few stars in the game. And then Steve, you were saying, because Steve's in Finland, he's obviously on a different time zone. He wasn't looking at the 600 odd messages that we'd posted since that game, and then didn't see that Tommy Mack had got the biscuits until this moment.
No,
So
I had no
Steve,
idea. I was like, because he wasn't bad. Don't get me wrong; he didn't play a bad game. He was solid. But yeah, because I watched the game on a delay. Like I often watch the early games because they're early here. Like they start very early in the morning here. Often the day games in Australia. And so yeah, so I'll look at the Bevy chat, and there's like hundreds and hundreds of messages from during and after the game. And so I just didn't look at them. And I'm like, okay, Tommy got 3. Good on him. I'm actually now coming around. I've looked at the stats you got here. Now that I've looked at the notes on our run sheet, yeah, actually he did play pretty well.
There you go. 11 1%ers, as Tommy is a brilliant at. He led the competition last year. 7 marks, second in the team, 14 touches, which is not bad at all. But I will, let me quickly. Riley Macca, who has a YouTube channel, and I strongly recommend to everyone out there to go follow him. He's very, very good. He's actually a big Swans fans, and I wouldn't say they're geared towards the Swans. They're not at all. They're very in the middle, but he does love his Swans. So Riley Macca mentioned on Twitter, stats-wise, Tommy Mack has been the best one-on-one key defender in the comp so far. Lowest contested defensive loss percentage and tied 5th for most intercepts. So an interesting bit of stats there. I think Tommy Mack has played an incredible first for 3 games, even in this loss. But I can totally appreciate what you're saying, Steve-O, because as it turns out, Mongrel Punt, who is arguably the best, not even I think it's just they are clearly the best AFL media destination going around. They also agreed that Tommy Mack wasn't great and that he was mismatched coming up the ground and everything. So if you did believe that, Steve-O, you might be in good company. But across the board, Swans fans-wise, yeah, we all kind of I've seen everywhere Tommy Mack is kind of the man where we want to give the biscuits to. So I don't know.
I'm just the only stat that I can back this up with, because all of the stats that you've given are very good. The only stat to back my point is that I guess if you concede, what was it, 21 goals? 21 goals. It's kind of hard to give best on ground to your fullback when you're leaking 5 goals a quarter. I mean, you can really blame the midfield. Honestly, it's never the backline's fault. Just ask a defender. It's always the midfield. So maybe we should be looking at them. Shouldn't be giving any votes to the mids.
Yeah, well, we're about to. So 2 points to Millsy with his 25 touches, best on the team, 4 tackles, 4 clearances, second on the team. How did you see Millsy's game there, Steve-O?
He never gives up, does he? He was one of the ones who, in a pretty disappointing day, could at least go home and said he had a decent go. It wasn't his best game, but, he tried.
Yeah, his effort was there. Excuse me. The first bit of the game, he was clunky. He was kind of not to be seen a bit, which is a bit unusual for him. And I don't know. I felt that he a couple of missed tackles, a couple of mistakes. He just wasn't grand. Definitely a big change when he walked over to Oliver in the second half and started tagging him, and then started getting his touches, started making more of an impact. So, yeah, I was definitely happy with the way that he went over there. So that did make a big difference to his impact on the game.
Yeah, definitely. He came into the game, and in that period where the Swans sort of got a bit of momentum back, Mills was very involved.
Good. Okay, so no controversy there with the Mills one. Good to hear. The Bevy's in alignment. None this time. 1 point out to Ollie. Now, we did amongst us kind of chat about who would get that 1 point. There's a couple other names that we can mention, but Ollie ended up getting the official Bob points. How did you see Ollie's game there, mate?
He was good. I mean, similar to Mills, he put in a good effort for most of the game. He did his best to try and get the team going. He used the ball well. I think his role across halfback, he's becoming a very, very good AFL level player across halfback, which is nice to see. And today he just kept going.
Yeah, I agree. Look, rattle off a couple of stats. 21 touches, second on the team, 5 of those contested, and 3 tackles. So with Ollie, I just felt that he was finding space when there was limited space. They had Blakey and Warner entirely wrapped up, and it seemed like Ollie was managing to get himself the pill and also find himself a bit of space to get going. And there's a few moments in the game where he had the ball running through center square again for being the third week in a row, which is finding himself space in a place where you shouldn't have space, and being able to use it somewhat effectively. So I liked what I saw, and I liked what I've seen about him this entire year. To be honest with you, I kind of feel like stepped up a notch. So yeah, one biscuit over to Ollie, mate. Anyone else that you want to flag as having a decent game that could have arguably taken a biscuit?
There weren't any real standouts, so there's always going to be quite a few you're going to argue over when there's no real amazing performers on the day. Papley already talked about. I thought he was good. His involvement and his impact and the way that he sort of got the team up and going. Like he scored goals at key moments, which I think was really good. All three of the tall forwards, I've read a bit in the media and heard a bit in the media getting stuck into the Swans tours. I thought all three of them, like Franklin, Amadi and McDonald, they all played good games. It changes, with Franklin in the team, it was never going to be like it was against Hawthorn with the two young guns up and about dominating the forward 50. So Amadi especially got much more of his football outside of the front 50 compared to previous week, with Franklin in there, and Franklin's the main target in there. He was the one that was most targeted in the forward 50. The stats, this is off on the couch. They listed that Franklin was targeted 10 times, Papley, Hayward, McDonald all 3, McInerney 2, and Amadi 1 with kicks inside 50 when it was to a clear target. So that changed the dynamic. I thought they were pretty good, all three of them. Go for it.
I was just going to just butt in there with the Amadi piece. The one thing I did notice was the Buddy piece. Heaney, the whole team is still targeting Buddy a little bit too much, a little bit to our detriment. But all in all, I think the tall forwards were doing their job. They kind of got mixed up a bit between each other, both hitting a contest when arguably one of them should have been feeding off somewhere else. But nonetheless, like they're all looking pretty good. That 3 tall prong attack is not something I think we necessarily want to be happening every week, but it's not terrible. And Amadi, seems to be getting better with the extra time he's having on the ground. So excited about that.
I'm one of the first that last year and coming into this season, I was very unsure. Like, is him and McLean, the pair of them, are these two guys going to actually be the forwards that we're hoping for after Franklin, or are they just going to be the sort of guys who are okay and maybe get sent off to another club or don't make it in the AFL? Amadi this week and last week has shown a lot to suggest that he is capable of being that type of forward, which is nice to see. And he's going to take time to develop. He's a young forward. He's played a handful of games.
Anyone else on your list there, mate?
Yeah, and I'll chuck in the ever reliable Jake Lloyd. Most weeks he does everything that he should do. He uses the ball very well. He's stable. He's got quite a few detractors out there. Jake Lloyd, especially in his latter couple of years, he's still a very, very good player, and he was dependable in that game. The way that he contributed.
No worries. Agree with all that. Lloydie is always, dependable man. Mr. Dependable up forward as well. And Harry Cunningham was playing a different role altogether and also wound up back a couple of times to help out. So they're happy to see him kind of get more of the ball as well. So someone I wanted to point out. Mate, post-game. So what were we at? So injury-wise, I didn't see any injuries. There was nothing listed anyway. But I did see Heaney banged up at points during the game. Anything else going on with on the ground that you noticed?
There was nothing reported out of it. It looks like everyone was fit coming from it. Yeah, it's interesting you say Heaney, he looked banged up because it's a big question. Like he was pretty ordinary, really, against Melbourne for a bloke who was in the All-Australian team 6 months ago. So it makes you wonder, like, is there something going on? Is he just out of sorts? Is he playing with an injury? Is his role a bit weird? I mean, who knows? You got any ideas to what the Heaney solution is or situation?
No, I mean, I thought it might have been some injuries there, and are they? Is he carrying an injury? Is he just kind of is like a bad call? He needs to run himself through. I wasn't sure how to deal with it, but then seeing it, I think it was the first quarter. When you saw Horse just absolutely shredding into Heaney in particular. Just going off, and I'm like, okay, it can't be an injury if Horse is laying into him. It's got to be his general game. So I'm kind of, and this is all speculation, of course, is I don't know anything other than what we know, what we've seen on TV. So I would be putting aside, is he carrying an injury, or at least carrying an injury that's really slowing him down a lot, like Millsy was last year with the ankle at points. I don't think it's something like that. I think it's his role and his just game is just flat, and I don't know why. I think his partner lives around the corner from me, so I might go sit outside her place and just ask, just wait for him and just ask questions as he comes in. Just go, excuse me, you don't
I've
know
got a
me.
podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't know me, but I have a podcast. I did see a couple of others though, like Harry Cunningham got absolutely whacked in the head by Laddams in a contest and went down for a concussion test. Came back and played the rest of the game, so that was fine. And Rowie also copped an absolute smashing in the head. I think it was an Clayton Oliver clash. Gashed himself up in his head pretty big. Got himself strapped up. I think he got tested and then went back onto the ground. So a couple of close calls, but I think we walked away somewhat unscathed. So that's
Good.
the way I saw it. MRO, nothing to report, unless you saw anything,
Don't think
Steve.
so.
I didn't see anything.
Oh mate, I was watching that game live actually, the Blues Giants one when that happened, and I couldn't figure out what happened. And because I've got it on like the international footy streaming thing, you can do like live rewind, and I rewound to figure out. I still couldn't figure out what happened until I explained it at 3/4 time, whatever it was. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, the dissent thing is a bit of a joke at the moment. Like how did you feel about Hayward getting up angrily and then copying a dissent for the sake of it? The way that I saw it was he was just frustrated, didn't understand why that foul was called, got up and just screamed out the F word onto the ground, and then flexing at the same time, just a really frustrated young guy. And they called that as being aggressive towards the ref, the ump, and they gave him a 50 for his effort. I felt that was a bit hard done by. I'm like, if you're going to ask a passionate AFL player to not get, not flex his muscles and scream at something that of a mistake they've made, you're asking a lot, I feel. And it wasn't directed at the umpire that I saw anyway. And yeah, he might have said the F word, but the F word is not. It's not on the umpire sheet of things you can't do. Otherwise, there'd be a lot of free kicks given. I saw it as being ordinary, mate. And I know it's just one call out of many.
I think this dissent thing, I mean, it goes back to this one with Stephen Coniglio in the Giants game the day before, where it was just, I mean, it was absurd, really. And there's a difference between something which is aggressive or abusive towards an umpire and just expressing frustration at something which has happened on the field. There's a big difference between those two things. And I can totally understand why the AFL wants to reduce any sort of negative behaviour towards umpires. That's perfectly sensible. They need to encourage umpiring at junior levels, and if it's not there at the AFL, then there's no respect. But I think that these sorts of incidents where clearly it's gone too far the other way, it can have the reverse effect, because what happens after, say, the one in the Giants Blues game, what happens after that is that the crowd turns on the umpire. So you then get the opposite outcome for what you're hoping for. And I think there's got to be a bit more, like you said, a bit more acknowledgement that there is human emotion involved in sport, and that you have to give a little bit of flexibility when there's no harmful intent.
The part that I kind of does my head in a bit as well is that there was plenty. It's just the inconsistency. There was plenty of moments in the game, other games throughout the weekend, and in those same games, where the same thing's happening, where the players are putting their hands wide and asking why. And there was an instance in the Blues Giants game where they were pointing at the screen, like, look at that. Like, if that's I thought the point about dissent, and when it originally came in, was just to take away the abuse to an umpire. That, for that purpose, I could not agree more. I think it's a perfect thing. And if you're going to be sitting there, even if you're sitting on the sideline and you're screaming murder at these umpires, I agree with your point. The point of it being that we're trying to protect the umpires at a junior level. If you're doing that on the ground, send you. You know what I mean? You got to walk away. They do it in baseball. If you're on the side of if you're just a spectator and you're just screaming murder at an umpire, they'll send you. You can't watch the game, even if you're at a park game watching a under 12s or whatever. And I know this from experience being a umpire in baseball. And I think that's a good thing for the game. It helps with the juniors because you do want the 14-year-old kid to be playing and coaching if umpiring if he's interested in it. And if you're taking that away, the aggressive element away, that might scare someone off. I think that's a good thing. But what you can't do is then assume that everything spoken to the umpire that's in disagreement is presumably dissent. That's not dissent. If you're screaming F whatever at an umpire really angrily, that yeah, absolutely. Every day of the week before this dissent rule came in, that would have been abuse to an umpire. I don't know if there was a rule for it, but that should have been given a 50. But if you're getting up, screaming, hollering, and a bit annoyed, that's nothing. If you're putting your hands sideways and not necessarily towards the ref, that also isn't dissent. So I think there's just so much grey area, and no one's applying it in a consistent form. And I think that the umpires themselves are not in alignment to what it is, because a different umpire will call it. This week, it was definitely something. It was the thing of the week. All the umpires were out there to try to do something about it, or make sure that they remember that this was a rule that we need to enforce. But they're all enforced at different levels, and I genuinely think that the umpire ranks don't even agree with bits of it. So there's a lot of questions to be asked. It just annoys me that it ruined an AFL game for someone, not the Swans, because it didn't affect the Swans scoreline by 50 points, but it is something that will, and it has already. We just need to kind of stamp it out and just kind of work it out a bit better. Surely the AFL is good enough for this.
I guess I'll just say one other thing is that because we talk about the players having emotion and being human, and the umpires are the same. And you've umpired sport, I have as well, and it's stressful, and every umpire is going to react differently. And so, if the AFL is not providing umpires with good, clear guidelines, then if an umpire's under stress and having a bad day, maybe that umpire who called that one against Coniglio was just fed up because he'd had players questioning him all day and he just snapped. Who knows? We don't know, but there needs to be something clear from the AFL so that this doesn't become the unwanted spectacle that it's clearly become over this week.
Couldn't agree more. And I think your point too, it just ends up meaning that the crowd just turns on the umpires, and that's the worst thing. The point about the umpires is we're not meant to notice them, and when something like this happens, when you give them the tools to do something to change the momentum of the game that's not related to anything on the ground. So not with the play of the ball necessarily. That's bad, right? That's a bad look. You can tell the crowd's going to just start ripping into you because they've noticed you now. Like when you've noticed the umpire, you get mad about it. But that's not to say that the dissent rule isn't important. We want to definitely stamp some of this stuff out of the game, but in the current state, it's not doing it. It's actually doing the opposite. So anyway, we talked enough about that. Right, let's go back to the Swannies. Mate, the game against the D's was pretty rough. Let's be fair, flat across the board. Replacements wise, do you see us swinging the axe at all?
Like we were talking about before, if we look at this game as an aberration, just like one crappy effort in a whole season, then there's not really any need to overreact with big selection changes, I don't think. And honestly, even if the Swans did, even if Longmire's furious and he just wants to drop half the team, who's he going to put in? I was looking at the VFL results from the Swans VFL versus Casey Demons. They lost by about, 40 points or so, 42 points, I think it says here. They lost every quarter. They had 13 AFL listed players, the Swans, playing in that game, 13. But of those 13, only McLean with 33 games, Francis with 54 games, and Sheldrick with 2 games. They're the only ones who've ever played AFL before. So we only had 3 fit players with AFL experience playing football last week. So who comes in? You can't really do much. That's the backup, because the injury list is pretty tough at the moment. You've got Clark, who's 1 to 2 weeks away, Wicks, who's to be confirmed, Constanti, who's a young guy who could hopefully have been coming in to play early in the season, we thought maybe, also to be confirmed injured, Reed 2 weeks away, Hickey 3 weeks away, Fox 1 to 2 away, and Melican indefinite. So there's not really anyone lining up to come in. Sheldrick had a great game. He had 34 touches in the VFL, 9 clearances. McAndrew was solid in the ruck. Gould, we haven't heard from over the preseason, hardly cited. There's not really a long list of people that are pushing to get into the
Yeah,
seniors.
and this is different to other years where we've been lucky enough to have ourselves some depth where we've had competition pretty much all around the ground, with the exception of the Miz, but they're unique and tough to build out. But this is and this is something I actually wanted to bring up last week as well. But given that the win was so convincing against the Hawks, we kind of laid off it. But the VFL side, and this is just a bit of a flag now to anyone listening in, we are light on depth down the line, and this might come and bite us in time. But it's to your point. We don't really have a lot we can do about it. So, yeah, sure, the Amadi McLean one is the obvious one. They're the two that are kind of battling out, and Amadi is winning at the moment, with the McLean's one prior to that. Other than that, we've got a couple of fellows that could help out in pinch, like Aaron Francis, as you mentioned. But there's not really going to be a bunch of guys that are knocking on the door and in the mix for getting time on the ground. Will Gould has not played well in the VFL at all in this year, so we probably he's not knocking down the door for a crack at either as well. So yeah, tough one to be, mate. It's kind of flagged that we don't really have the depth that we do other years. I'm a bit worried about it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, because I mean, after last season, a lot of these sort of depth, like fringe depth players, all got delisted or retired. Like Colin O'Riordan left, Ben Ronk, Bell, they were all gone, and Lewis Taylor also. These are all players who would be able to come into the team and play a role if necessary. None of those players exist now. We've got a bunch of 18, 19, 20-year-olds with zero AFL games to their name, and not probably ready to play AFL. A lot of them.
Definitely. Like, there's no. We're pretty excited about a fair few of them. Nonetheless, I think they're going to come good. But yeah, there's some time to put into them before we get the benefits. Like, all right, well, let's not. If we were going to swing the axe, let's not sit on the fence here. Would we be swinging the axe this week? As you mentioned, it's an aberration. I personally think no. I think the team that we had out there that ran on is a team that will continue to play. I think they're the best that we have outside of a couple of injuries with Hickey and Fox. And even then, to get them on the ground, where would I place them? So I still see us just running that same team on for next week. Do you feel the same way?
One I think about is Matt Roberts, the young guy who's been the sub 3 weeks in a row now, hasn't he? He was sub round 1, 2, and 3. So he's only come on and played about a quarter 3 weeks in a row now, which means he's been without a full game for almost a month. But then they have a problem that this coming weekend, the Swans VFL has a bye. So he doesn't have an opportunity to go back to the VFL and play a full game this weekend. So you wonder what they might want to do with him, because Sheldrick in the first 2 weeks in the VFL has been dominant. So he's really putting pressure to get himself into the 23. He's probably the only one, but he's still putting the pressure on. Roberts, you would think, is the most vulnerable, but then you can't give him a full run this week because there's no game. So my guess is, it probably stays the same.
That's fair. I think the Amadi piece, so the Amadi's been the one that they've subbed out, and that's partly because his running fitness isn't entirely there yet. He hasn't had a preseason arguably ever because of injuries along the way and whatnot. And we can all see his talent. We're all quite excited about seeing. The more we see of him, the more we're excited about it. But he's been taking only 3 quarters at a time with Roberts coming in. So it's kind of, that's, to your point, Stevo, if we want to develop either one of them, you kind of want them to run on for the whole game, or there's a good reason for it. So Roberts is probably knocking down the door to have a crack somewhere on the field. Where that is, I don't know. I saw Dill got pulled in the game. I personally think because of Horse's frustration, he was just not happy with him. Dill played the worst game he has in the last good year or so. But that's not to say that he has not going to turn around quickly. Effort was there, just execution wasn't. I still see him keeping his spot, and I don't see Roberts necessarily coming in too much of it. So we'll find out where it's all up to anyway.
Oh, no, I was saying he's Stevens. He's effectively a second year player, because his first full season was last year, not even a full season, I guess. So he's going to take time to develop and learn, I think, just because he was a very high draft pick. We can't expect him to just be a dominant player right away. Different guys take different amount of time. And maybe he does need a week off. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe he does get a rest, or maybe Cunningham's knock was worse than we thought, or whatever, and he comes out and someone comes in. But as we said, there's only really 3 guys in the reserves right now that are likely to come in.
Well, I'm excited about the Gus bus. I'd like to see him get a bit of time on there, but we'll find out. His size is good. He likes to get his hands on the ball. He's a desperate crummy player, something that we kind of are missing a little bit more in the mid. So, but does that mean we're going to have him? Oh, while I have you, mate, Errol Goulden, bit of a tangent, smooth transition over the Errol Goulden. I just felt that his role in the mids is not there. I don't think we're being able to utilize his proper skill set of vision around the ground, having the extra second to just nail that kick. And we saw a couple of them on the game last week. By him being in the mids, he can tackle. He's a great tackler for his size. He's very, very good. But I don't think we're getting the most out of him. And I don't see how we would be able to, given the nature of that role. What is your take on it? I'd like to hear it. I know you're a massive Gould fan.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with him it's a tough one. And like watching the games on TV, it's hard to see how players are moving around the ground. So you never really know more than what you see on your screen. And we know that AFL is not the best sport to watch on a telly. With Goulden, I wonder if he's getting more attention than he's been getting previously. And I don't mean like a hard tag or anything. I just mean that he's getting more physicality around the ground than what he might have got in his first couple of seasons. Because in that preseason game, he got like 45 touches, and everyone with a fantasy league team put him in there. And we do forget that he's still like an early third-year player, so he's going to have fluctuations in form. He's playing, and he's not a huge guy. Like he's a smaller body player. He's playing against giants every week. Like he's going up against midfielders who have got 12, 14 plus centimeters and 10 plus kilos on him. So he's getting that physical battering much more around the ball than he was on a wing and a half forward last year. So I wonder whether that maybe contributes, but I'm really just guessing because I think he's awesome. I don't have a bad word to say about him.
I know, I love him. I love him. I'm so excited about seeing him more. I want to see him with the ball more, with more space. I know we'd seen how damaging he can be, and he's very clever. He finds himself space. He finds himself an opportunity. So maybe it is. He's a smart player. He's tough. He's not going to back down from a contest. So having extra time in the mids perhaps does allow him to find enough time and space to make it his own and unique little brand of it. But in a game against the D's, I would have loved to have seen someone roll in and then he roll out a little bit more to be a bit more damaging with it. But I mean, the whole, we weren't beaten by one player. We were beaten by quite a few. So it's there was probably a lot to it.
And Goulden too. Like in the first 2 weeks against Gold Coast and Hawthorn, he was in our best players. So he's had one flat week, and he's 20 or 21 years old. So
thank you, Stevo, for talking me off the bridge there.
The Errol Goulden defence was complete for the day.
There you go. The phalanx over there.
I wasn't so kind to Tommy McCartan, but I've got.
Where's the Tommy? No, I was defending Tommy McCartan.
I was not, and I maybe should have, but I didn't.
Yeah, well, we'll remember this. The fans will start just giving us hate mail soon enough.
Yeah, that's it. I'll have to go silent on social media. I'll have to close all my profiles.
And speaking of, Speaking of a number one Errol Goulden fan, it probably goes out to Talia, and I should do a bit of a shout out. Talia, who's a massive Swans fan, huge Errol Goulden fan, actually did our halftime review from the MCG, which is really lovely of her. She was pretty nervous, and she did an amazing job. So well done, Talia. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I saw that. It was good. It was a good one.
Yeah, she was grand. She was perfect. She was saying she was nervous, and she said it over. And I'm just like, damn, that was great. What are you talking about? She's a huge Errol Goulden fan, so I just want to shout that out. So any negativity that I push towards Errol Goulden, I'll hear it, no doubt about it. All right, back to the Port Adelaide game. Port Adelaide SCG on Saturday. We haven't lost. Sorry, we haven't beaten Port Adelaide since 2016. Did you know that? I was baffled.
I didn't know that actually. What was happening? That we won the. We didn't win the. We didn't win. We did the opposite of we unwon the grand final that year, didn't we? So it was. Yeah, it's a long time ago.
Yeah, round 20, 2016 was the last time we beat them. That was at the SCG. Yeah, and it was like 6 straight losses against them. Otherwise, prior to that, it was 4 straight wins to us. But with the last 4 games being at the Adelaide Oval, so I don't know whether that makes a bit of a difference or whether they were up and about. Like, let's have a look at the year. So we played them once per year, give or take. So yep, that's exactly what's happened. So nothing, just the one effort per year. And, there's a couple of times I can understand we weren't that great, 2020, 2019. But yeah, I'm surprised. So it sounds like they're a bit of a bogey side, perhaps, or they just got up and about during these periods of time. The wins haven't been one convincing win by over 40 points back in 2019, but yeah, that's kind of expected. Otherwise, it's relatively close-ish games. So I'm not too fussed about that. The Port Adelaide team is they're kind of up and down. They're all over the shop. They lost in the fourth quarter in the showdown with Dawson being best on ground, and with a ranking kicking 5 and another gent kicking, ranking kicking 4. So, but Port Adelaide's got a couple of key players, man, including our Ali Alia in the back line there. Connor Rosie, who's racking up touches. Scott Lysette in the ruck, who we were desperate to get, didn't get there. And William Dew just absolutely dominating tackles with an average of like close to 7 tackles per game. So really strong team, right? How do you see them? What's your take on all those guys?
It's hard early in the year, but I don't know. If we look at their results, first round they belted Brisbane like 54 points. Then they got smashed by Collingwood by 71, and then they lost their home showdown in their black and white jumpers by 5 goals to Adelaide Crows. So I don't know. I'm more interested in the first result, because if the Port that smashed Brisbane comes up against the Swans, then we're going to have a tough day, because their best football is very good, and they were the same last year. They were kind of thereabouts, and then they teased a bit, and they didn't quite. And it depends which Port Adelaide we get. And if Ollie Wines gets in there and bashes us up, just like he did against Brisbane in the first week, and like he did against us last year, actually he was very very good against us last year. We're going to have a tough day. Sydney's best football is better than Port Adelaide's best football, but if the Swans are off like they were against Melbourne and Port are up, then they'll beat us.
We're looking at this week to being a bit of a showcase of how we can bounce back from a bad loss. Definitely want to see the Swans really get out there and play our best game. Like we mentioned this entire potty, are we fussed about the game against the D's? Probably not. It sounds like we're like, okay, cool. We got beaten convincingly by a convincingly very good team, who is in the premiership window, who have fantastic players across the ground, just strong everywhere, built a very good team, and coached quite well. And so we were beaten by them. Fair enough. It happens. It's how we back it up. And this week is going to be very important. You just imagine that Horse is in there every day, just ripping into these guys to get them fired up for this weekend. We can't have that kind of effort or that kind of, I don't know, confidence going in for 2 weeks. We need to change it all up. So bit to go on there, mate. Do you have any predictions on your side? Do you have that in you? I've stopped doing them since the Bombers game that I gave out last year.
I think the Swans are going to get a win. I think, like we said, the Melbourne game was disappointing. If they turn in a similar effort against Port and get done, then I'll start to be wondering what's going on. But if they come back out and play what we know they can do, this team was in a grand final like 6 months ago. The Swans are not a bad team. It's the same team more or less that we had, like almost the same team. Sydney's best football, I reckon they'll win by, not a flogging, but a solid win. And so I'd be definitely in. And it's the first Saturday night game at the SCG, right? Isn't it? It's just Saturday night, yeah. Swans will come out all fired up. They like Saturday night at the SCG. A lot of good Swans moments have happened Saturday nights at the SCG. I think this will be another one.
Yeah, perfect. All right, no worries. I am going to hold back, as I mentioned, my prediction for Bombers last year, and then them turning around and having the worst game I've ever seen in my life. It will haunt me forever. Granted, they did then pick it up from there and then roll themselves into a grand final. So maybe I should be saying something, but I'm not. Anyway, it is. Is it celebration round this week? No, the week after. But is, are we meant to be saying goodbye to Gil?
Yeah, it's got to be coming up, right? You had a chat with him the other week, and he didn't want to be set to a date, but I think they were talking about the Adelaide Gather round would be his final round as CEO, right? So maybe they're going to soon tell us who the next boss is.
Yeah, and that's round. Is that round 7 then? Who's replacing him? Should we not know by now? It's happening in like 10 days. Like, can we find out, please? I want to know. I spend a lot of time on this game and I enjoy it, and I want to know who's bloody well running it.
I think he's just going to stay in the job for as long as he possibly can until they find someone else to do it. Maybe no one wants to do it. I don't know. It must be a tough job, right?
We're talking off air, and I think part of the reason of Gil's success, of why he's done, he's kept the role and been at it for some time. He doesn't. He acts as if he's better than us, and it kind of works.
He does have very nice hair
with it
because he's a middle 40s year old
hair.
man, and that hair is just immaculate. So it's very hard not to think that he is the best man to run the AFL purely on the head of hair.
It's hard not to appreciate a man with that kind of like hair. Yeah. I saw it in person. I feel that, and this is a bit of inside tip for everyone. I feel that a bit of its combing action, a bit of the combing action to keep keep bits of shadow in certain sections. Yeah. I think there's a bit of combing going on. Anyway, I'll leave that there as the most controversial thing said on this podcast outside of Stevo saying Tommy Mack was awful.
Bashing poor Tommy McCartan for having a good game. But could you replace that beautiful head of hair with, maybe that's why Tom Harley's out of the running, because we heard about Tom Harley to start with and we've heard nothing for months about Tom. It's probably the dome that's keeping him off the books. So maybe you need some
Mate, I don't think he's ever had hair. I think he came out of the womb with no hair and he's just kept it that way for whatever. So yeah, it probably could be. I
feel you, Tom. I feel you as a hair.
Stevo is not graced in that way either. No. So let's just keep that there. Well, look, we're going to head into the last minute things. It's been a long podcast. Before we wrap up, I really want to give an enormous shout out to the SCG Trust and the Swans, who were beautiful enough to give seats to Kenny and Yvonne Williams on their favorite spots, and that have their names and are colored in the red and white. There was a video going around yesterday where the Swans were, day before yesterday, I apologize, the Swans were showing Yvonne the seats that they made them. She had no idea that it was coming, and she was just in tears, and we're all in tears, and it's just a really beautiful gesture. I'm the first one to smash the SCG Trust at any opportunity, but I'll tell you what, they did an amazing job this time around to put this together, and it just goes to show how close the Swans are united to the SCG, and in particular how Kenny was united to all of us as an ultimate fan. Right? Beautiful, beautiful gesture by both of them. Well done, Swans and the SCG Trust. A really good thing, and there's not a single Swans fan that wouldn't say that was 100% worth it, and we probably should be doing more for Kenny and his family. So thank you very much. Anything yourself there, Stevo, you want to jump in with it?
Just to agree with what you said, it was fantastic. I mean, I remember even like in the 90s watching Swans games at the SCG and seeing Kenny and all of his crew behind the goals down there, and absolutely essential part of the club for a long, long time. So great to see them get that recognition.
Yeah, deserved, and yeah, we should be. Hope we find a way to do more. Well, that brings us to the end of the episode. So on behalf of Bob, thank you very much for everyone in listening in. And if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcast, please make sure to follow the channel and like this episode. It does go a long way to supporting the bevy. And frankly, there is very little good Swans content out there by general AFL media. So to support your podcasts, wherever they are, is a big win for all Swans fans. But up until then, up the Bloods and can't use 20s.